Welcome back to the Secular Homeschool Revolution. I am your host, Ashley, and as always, I'm so grateful for your time and energy. If you are a homeschooling parent, especially one who identifies as part of the Black, Indigenous, person of color, you're secular or progressive, this episode is for you. Today, we are going to unpack something that isn't always talked about openly in homeschool circles, but it must be addressed. And I've talked about it previously on other episodes, but I would like to readdress it. And the truth is that homeschooling is political. Whether we realize it or not, the choices that we make about how and where our kids are educated are deeply connected to this societal conversation around equity, access, and representation. And somehow in 2024, equity, access, and representation have become these big ouch words. WTF. So take a deep breath with me, breathe in and breathe out. Because yes, this is a big conversation, but it's an important one. So let's dig in. Now, when I say homeschooling is political, some of you might feel a little resistance around that, and that's okay. Homeschooling in itself is seen as a personal choice, something we do for our families, our children, and ourselves. But here's the thing. Every personal choice exists within a larger system. So when we pull our kids out of mainstream education and create an alternative space for learning, we engage with that system even if it's indirectly. So think about why you chose to homeschool. It could be you wanted your kids to learn without facing any discrimination. Maybe you wanted your kids to have a more diverse perspective in their history classes than what traditional brick and mortar schools can offer. Or perhaps, like a lot of secular and progressive spaces, you just wanted an educational environment that aligns with your values of inclusion and equality. But whatever your reason, your decision does carry a ripple effect. By homeschooling, we are saying we want something better, we want something different, we want something more for our kids. And that in itself is inherently political. Join me as I jump on my soapbox of homeschooling is also an act of decolonization for many BIPOC families because traditional education systems in many countries, including the US, was built within a very particular context. Can you guess? Well, that context centers Eurocentric worldviews, it marginalizes non-white narratives, and it ignores the experiences of the diverse community. So they're saying, queer community, you don't need representation. We don't want to hear none of that. And it does that to so many communities. And a lot of us homeschooling parents, especially the progressive ones, we're seeing it, we grew up in it, and we're saying, that's enough. We're not tolerating that anymore. And so we are actively taking charge of our kids' education, and we're taking advantage of the amazing opportunity homeschooling allows. We are teaching them some histories that go beyond what's written in the textbook, what's being force-fed down their throats, because I'm in Texas and the State Board of Education just passed this Bluebonnet curriculum, and it is a Bible-based curriculum. It silences marginalized communities, it silences diverse perspectives, And the kicker is the governor here is being a bully. He was withholding some funds that would clear up a lot of deficits for a lot of school districts to starve them out to get the support of school choice. And while I know I'm a homeschooler and homeschooling falls under school choice, I still actively feel like all kids deserve a great education, even when it's through the public school system. Well, he got the vote. And so school districts, which I think a lot of them will end up, taking advantage of this curriculum because he's offering financial incentives for schools to adopt this curriculum that would, help their budget. And I'm just like, man. So we're as homeschooling parents, we're figuring things out. We also are exposing our kids to a variety of global perspectives, right, that celebrate rather than dismiss diversity. And we are creating these environments where our kids' identity in all its facets are being seen, valued, and celebrated. And even that right there is a moment of reflection because, us as adults, if we saw ourselves fully seen, valued, and celebrated in the education system, what type of impact would that have had on us? Some food for thought. And the other thing is when we're raising these socially and historically conscious kids, we are having to confront our own biases because we grew up in that system we don't have them in, right? So it takes a lot of work on our end to make sure, as homeschooling educators, that we are doing enough to build these inclusive environments within our homes. Because homeschooling isn't just about resisting what's broken out there. It is an opportunity for us to do better in here. And with that being said, ask yourself this week, or whenever you guys start back up for homeschooling, am I including diverse voices and stories and perspectives in our learning? Where can I improve? And let that be a guide for your homeschooling journey, and keep that question. That is a question I do keep in my little journal, my homeschooling journal. I don't keep super stringent notes or anything, but I do like to take note of what we accomplished for the week. And I'm like, did I do a different voice? Did I expose them to something different? And I have to hold myself accountable and answer on how I did it. So let's discuss the danger of neutrality. One of the common myths I want to debunk is the idea of being neutral in education. That is so harmful. So whether you're in homeschooling or it's public school or private school, neutrality often, not often, I want to say always, serves the status quo. And when we avoid talking to our kids about race, class, gender, or privilege, what we're doing is allowing dominant narratives to remain unchallenged. So the system is working how it was designed to work, and we haven't had this resurgence of reclaiming our histories. And it's just flowing. It just keeps going, regurgitating the same information. That definitely doesn't support marginalized perspectives. And this exact neutrality is one of the reasons a lot of us turn to homeschooling, because the system's not being challenged. And as progressive and secular homeschoolers, we have this amazing opportunity to create curriculums that normalize speaking about injustices, inequality, and activism. There are more curriculums that have that than there were homeschooling curriculums than there were 5 years ago, but you also still have the ability to create your own. to teach critical thinking, to encourage kids to question what they read, and even question resources that we provide for them as their home educators. And I love this part. We get to equip them with tools to engage in meaningful conversations about fairness and justice. And when we sidestep these conversations, we're doing a huge disservice to our kids because we're missing out on that opportunity to raise aware and empathetic humans that the world needs. We're living through it, and the world definitely needs these humans that we are raising so this world can be a better place.
Story time.
A anecdote I would like to share about what happened with my 12-year-old. I think she was 11 at the time, but she was eating breakfast at the table and she was on the iPad playing this trivia game. And she came across this question that said Thanksgiving was a happy celebration between Native Americans and Pilgrims. And she was like, "Mom, that is not true." And so I looked at her and I said, "Well, what would you have wanted it to say instead?" And so she was like, "Well, Thanksgiving really involves a lot of injustice and violence and betrayal." And she was like, "The Native Americans definitely should not have tried to work with the colonizers." And so I mean, we talked about it more, and she was just like, "This is so frustrating. I hate how they keep lying." And I said, "Well, they definitely are oversimplifying things and creating these misleading narratives, but I'm glad we learned the truth. And if more kids knew what really happened, maybe things would start to change. So keep having the conversation." But I was telling my husband about what had happened, and that was just such a powerful moment for me because this is where that intentional home education was shining, because we were teaching her about history through an inclusive lens. We gave her access to accurate and diverse resources, and we just didn't give her the knowledge. Like we researched it, we went through the books, and the shining star of all this is like she's gaining confidence to challenge what she reads, to stand up for the truth and see the importance of justice. And watching her correct this misinformation showed me that this is all worth it. Even though it's hard sometimes, it's definitely worth it. The next thing I do want to discuss is building community around values. So I know that the homeschooling community in itself seems very fragmented. I get it, and secular homeschoolers are a very small percentage of it, especially depending on where you live. But I promise you, there are families out there who share your values. You just have to seek out those connections and be intentional with your seeking because people may want to build community, they just don't know how. So maybe you're the outspoken one or the one who plays a great leader, and it could be you. And even if it starts with just you and then another family, that's how community builds, right? You're slowly building on to your people. You can also find groups online, join local co-ops. I know people have mixed feelings about co-ops. I get it. I wasn't a big fan until we, started For the Culture. Follow For the Culture Homeschool on Instagram, and you can see all the cool work that we do. But we had to build it. But when we were building it, we were like, "Oh, our people are here. They're coming out." And here we are 3 years later, and we have a strong community. But it just took, a couple of people to be committed and showing up for each other, and it's grown significantly. Also, attend some events where educational equity and representation are being prioritized. And it may not be a whole family event. I know it could be like a workshop or a lecture. I know for our homeschooling community, we are attending the social justice workshop that's being put on by a local a nonprofit organization. And then we're going to grab dinner afterwards. But it's nice to have And they're women that are mostly going, but it's nice to have women in our circle who want to learn more about social justice in Texas. But it took a few years. I want to emphasize it took a few years so that there's some light in the tunnel. And like I said, I'm in San Antonio. It's a more progressive city, but I was still struggling to find some peoples. And when you do find your community, whether it's online or in person, it's cool because you get to pull your resources together, swap ideas, and most importantly, amplify the stories that matter. And you have like a board to bounce your wins and your struggles with, and they're truly going to get it. And because homeschooling in itself can feel isolating at times, but when you lean into it with other people who have shared values and strengths, it definitely empowers us as parents and educators. One thing I want you to take away from my ramble is your voice does matter, your perspective matters, and together we are redefining what education can and should be. And in closing out this episode today, I do want you to realize that homeschooling is political and it is powerful. And by choosing to homeschool, you are stepping into this role where you are actively challenging this flawed system. You are centering marginalized stories, and you are taking control of your kids' education and making sure that they grow up with critical thinking skills to reimagine the future. I thank you for being a part of this community with the Secular Homeschool Revolution and for caring so deeply about your kids and the world around them. So until next time, keep nurturing the dreamers, the thinkers, the change makers in your home because you are doing amazing work. Thank you for tuning in to the Secular Homeschool Revolution podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, share it with others who might find value in these conversations. And for more updates and supportive online community, please follow me on Instagram at the Secular Homeschool Revolution. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that inspires and empowers. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and making a difference. I'm out.